Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. It is the 39th day of the Omer. We are wrapping up the 5th parak of Sheviit in the Mishnah Yomi today. A similar theme to yesterday about selling kelim that might be used for illegal commercial enterprises on Sheviit. So here Mishnah Tes in the 5th parak. Mashelet isha lechaverta shuda ala Sheviit. A woman can lend out to her friend who's suspected of breaking Shvius. Here is breaking Shvius in the sense that there's a Zman Bior, as we've mentioned. Bior, we're going to discuss in the 7th parak, when the food is no longer available in the field, and you have to take out whatever you have of it in the house, and we'll discuss that in the 7th parak. So here, the food she has in her house might be illegally retained without beer. That's a problem. But regardless of that, a woman can lend to her friend a nafa v'kivra, a sifter and a sieve, rechaim v'tonur, and a mill and an oven. And the reason is these items could be used for a mutter purpose, not necessarily for processing grains into food, which would be a problem because there was no beer on these particular items. Avalo tavor v'lo tidchan ima. But she cannot sort or grind with her friends because that would be directly helping her. The next part of the Mishnah is Eishet Chaver, the wife of a Chaver. Now, a Chaver is someone who's very careful with Tuma and Tahara, and we've seen this concept in Demai. In Demai, we discussed tithing and how a Chaver has to retithe what he got from an Amaretz because we're worried he didn't separate all the tithes, so it has Demai status. So what's going on with the Eishes Chaver is Mashelet Leishet Amaaretz Nafa V'Kivra. She can lend out again her sieve and her sifter to the wife of the Am Haaretz. This Amaretz, he is not careful, he's not well educated or not scrupulous about Tuma and Tahara. Not only that, Boreret V'Tochenet U'Merkedet Ima. She can even sort the grains and grind them and sift them with her friend. Even though her friend is an Amaretz, she can go ahead and help her. Aval, but misha tati lamayim, when they put in the water, lo tiga etzla, don't touch anything. Don't touch the dough, don't knead the dough, don't bake the dough. Shein machazikin yedei over avera. You cannot strengthen the hands, meaning help out, assist, those who are doing an avera. So what's the avera here is once it's wet, or b'osai it's mikabel tuma. So this dough, if they're making enough dough, at least 5 pounds of flour worth of dough, there's an obligation to separate challah. Challah is actually the truma, the tithe that's separated. I know colloquially we call it challah, what we put on the table on Shabbos. That's not challah. That's bread that's metukan, that has the challah separated. Now nowadays we burn the challah because we're al tameh, the kohanim are al tameh. But back then, the kohanim would be eating this truma while they were tahor, while they were not contaminated. So to make the challah, this truma, contaminated is a very significant chet. It's a very big problem. So once it gets wet, the wife of the Amaretz, she's not careful, she may be tameya, her kelim, her clothing may be tameh. So it's a big problem. Once it gets wet, you can't help her because you're helping her to be contaminating truma. The Mishnah continues, Darchei Shalom. We say that we can lend out, we can assist, because of Darchei Shalom, of bringing peace and good relations, even people who are not necessarily on the same madrega, the same frumkeit, the same chaverkeit, but to be nice and to be helpful, of course, they're your friends, they're your brothers. And machzikin yedei ovdei kochavim b'shvit, and we can strengthen the hand, meaning to encourage the non-Jewish workers who are, they're plowing and they're farming and they're doing normal agricultural practices on Sheviit, aval lo yedei Yisrael. Now we saw this Mishnah before in the 4th parak, but because it's Darchei Shalom, our sages repeat it here. Sho'olin b'shlomim, you can ask them their peace, meaning Shalom Aleichem, how you doing, how's it going? Mipnei Darchei Shalom, because it's always good to have peace between people. So we begin the 6th parak in Sheviit. It's important to know a bit of a history lesson. There's a bit of a geography and history going on here. Is that there was a Kedusha Rishona, the land of Israel, the Holy Land, was sanctified by Yehoshua and the Jewish people when they entered, coming out of Egypt. It's Kidsha Rishona. But then at the time of the Churban and the exile to Bavel, that Kedusha was batal. Now when Ezra and the Olim from Bavel came back, there was a Kedusha Shnia, a second sanctification. Now the issue is not necessarily every piece of lands that was conquered originally by Joshua and the 12 tribes, not all of that was settled by the Ole Bavel, by Ezra and that generation. So there are some areas that were sanctified originally, but did not have the sanctity the second time around, which is the Kedusha, which is still ongoing to this day. The Rambam explains this in the 6th parak of Hilchot Beit HaBechira, about the Kedusha Rishona, Kedusha Shniya. This Mishnah is going to discuss sort of the border area where there is some overlap and some distinctions here. Sholosh Aratzot L'Shviit. There are 3 lands with respect to Shemitah. Kol Shechziku Ole Bavel. Any land that was settled by those coming up with Ezra from Babylon. Me'eretz Yisrael Kaziv. This goes from Eretz Yisrael until Kaziv. Kaziv, I think, is called Achziv now. There's a national park there. It's very nice, and there's a river, and it's north of Akko. It's in the north, not all the way near the northern border, but somewhat close to Rosh Hanikra on the northern border. So in this area, Lo ne'echal v'lo ne'avad. He cannot eat Shemitah produce after Zman Bir until he does Bir, as we're going to see in the 7th parak, and you cannot work the land at all during Shemitah. This has full Kedushas Shvius in this land up to and including Chziv. The Mishnah continues, the second area is Kol Shechaziko Ole Mitzrayim, the land that was conquered by Joshua and the Shvatim coming from Mitzrayim, Miksiv ad Nahar vad Amana. This is from Kziv up to the mountain of Amana and the river near there. The Mefarshim say this river is way over to maybe the Euphrates or another river in Syria. It goes way over, so it's not just up to Kziv, but it's way over also to the river. This area extended. So we see it was a much larger area that Joshua and the Shvatim originally conquered from what Ezra and the Ole Bavel settled. But this area has sort of a intermediate status. So the Mishnah explains, in Nechal, you could still eat the food after Zman Bir. You could keep it and eat it. Avalo Nevad, but you can't work this land. So what's going on is it has a degree of Kedushas Shvius, because it was originally sanctified, but that original sanctity is no longer in effect, but we still, rabbinically, do not allow working the land. The Mishnah concludes with the third area, Min Hanahar, outside of this river, Me'amana, or further up from these Amana mountains, Lifnim, outside of this, way up north, Lebanon, Nechov Nevad. You could eat the produce after beer, not an issue, and you could work the land entirely. It did not have Kedusha. Shkoyach Rabosai.